And my grandfather was old when the war started. He was already in his early 30s.
War can tear families apart.
It's not my story to tell.
But sometimes it brings them together.
And it says outstanding days as a POW.
Carl Unrein's dad, Tony, fought in World War II. So did Jim Smallwood's grandfather, Hans.
I didn't know it was 1939.
They both get a little emotional.
You cried too?
Talking about the men who are no longer here.
If your grandfather and our father could have met again in person, that would have just been, oh my gosh.
Their connection today began with an old note Carl's dad wrote Jim's mom decades ago.
So this is May 23rd,
1985.
I must apologize for not writing to you sooner.
Although I did not know your father, Hans, very long, we became
good friends.
Carl knows the story.
And it was his POW notes.
The bond began 30 years before.
January 21st, 1945.
Germans captured Carl's dad, an American lieutenant, in the Battle of the Bulge.
It talks about no food, being transported.
In a POW hospital camp, Lieutenant Tony Unrein met Jim's grandfather, Hans.
Hans and Dora, in his army uniform.
Hans Zemsch wore the uniform of atrocity.
If you're a person of German heritage, you always carry with you the little bit of shame of what happened in World War II.
Jim always heard his grandfather was drafted into the German army against his will.
My mother would occasionally drop little comments like, well, you know, your grandfather wasn't like that. You know, your grandfather wasn't a member of the party.
He wanted to believe it, but Jim didn't know for sure.
And I am still indebted to him for his
until he found the letter from Carl's dad.
To obtain food for all of the men in the barracks for which he was responsible.
You know, he talks specifically about Hans going and getting exactly what my mother had said, sausages and eggs and bread for the people that he was responsible for.
He was a good man.
He was a good man and cared for us as if we were brothers.
An act of humanity, still remembered 30 years later.
Hans was, you know, to my dad, an extremely kind human being, and treated him like a human being.
That brings a lot of comfort and a lot of relief.
Jim had to know more.
When I looked at the letter and read it for the first time, I'm like, this guy's from Denver. Right?
So he reached out to the American soldier's family, who lived just a 30-minute drive away.
Your grandfather saved my dad's life, giving him basic nourishment.
Carl already knew his dad's story. Now he could fill in the blanks for Jim.
Almost everything that I've learned about my grandfather came from Tony Unrein. Like, almost nothing came from my family.
Jim learned the friendship survived the war. For years, the two soldiers kept in touch.
So Hans sent these to my parents.
The connections today run deeper than they knew.
We live in a small world. We live in a small world.
Jim had been doing business with Carl's family for years.
Our brother Joe, right here, you run his pension plan. Is it still solvent? Yeah. Okay.
The beginning of a new bond, formed from one first made across enemy lines.
And it is tough for German guys to say the word love, but there was that love there.
Yeah.
It was there.
Had to be.
Cole Sullivan reporting. Carl's father started an ambulance business here in Denver after the war. Carl and his siblings worked there for years. In addition to managing pension plans, Jim represents Douglas County as the Republican Minority Caucus chair in the state Senate.